Elara Vance had learnt to measure her existence in the quiet spaces Alistair left behind. She lived in the echoes of his footsteps on the marble floor, in the lingering scent of his bay rum cologne on the morning air, in the faint, dark smudges of ink he sometimes left on the polished mahogany of his desk. For 7 years, her world had been the grand London townhouse of Duke Alistair Beaumont, a world in which she was a permanent, silent fixture, as exquisitely crafted and as thoroughly overlooked as the porcelain shepherdess on the mantelpiece. Her fingers, deft and patient, moved a soft chamois cloth over a silver snuff-box, erasing a day's worth of tarnish. It was her afternoon ritual, this polishing of his things. It was a task she had assigned herself, a way to feel a part of the life that flowed around her but never seemed to fully include her. She was not his duchess. She was not his wife. She was simply Elara, a name spoken with comfortable affection but never with the weight of true belonging. He had found her when she was 21. Adrift and disgraced after her father's financial ruin had shattered their family's name. Alistair, a man whose ambition was a palpable force, saw something in her quiet composure. He had offered her shelter, a life of serene comfort, and in return she had given him her loyalty, her quiet companionship, and a placid port to which his restless ship could always return. Now at 28, the comfort had begun to feel like a gilded cage. The silence between them had grown, no longer companionable, but vast and empty. The silence in the room was heavy, settling over the furniture like a layer of fine, undisturbed dust, a testament to all the things they no longer said. She would watch him across the dinner table. His dark brown eyes focused on some distant horizon of commerce or construction, his famously ink-stained fingers a sign of the empires he was building. He was a creator, a man who bent the world to his will, and she was merely a spectator. A familiar ache settled behind her ribs, a quiet grief for the girl who had once believed this arrangement was a form of love. She had been grateful then. Now, she was just, resigned. She finished polishing the box, its surface now a perfect, cold mirror. She saw her own reflection in it, a woman with pale, serious features and eyes that held a story no one had ever bothered to read. The front door opened and closed with a heavy, definitive sound. His footsteps were quicker than usual, accompanied by a second, lighter tread. Mr. Sterling, his man of business. Her hands stilled. Alistair rarely brought business home, and never without warning. She placed the snuff-box precisely in its spot on the desk and retreated from the study, melting back into the quiet shadows of the house that had become her habit. She slipped into the adjoining library, intending to wait until his meeting was concluded. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of an opening. She could hear their voices, low and serious. She had no intention of eavesdropping, her mind was on the mending she had left in her room upstairs. But then she heard her own name, spoken in Alistair's cool, measured tone, and she froze. "Elara will be taken care of course," Alistair said. There was no emotion in his voice. It was the same tone he used when discussing the price of timber or the logistics of a shipment. A small annuity. She is a sensible woman. She will understand it is for the best. Mr. Sterling murmured something she could not quite hear. "It is a necessity," Alistair's voice cut through the quiet. "My ventures require more than just capital. They require legitimacy. The Croft name provides that. Lady Beatrice's father has given his assent. The engagement will be announced by the end of the week." Lady Beatrice Croft, a name synonymous with old money and impeccable lineage. A perfect match for a duke whose title was ancient but whose fortune was new, built on stone and steel and relentless ambition. And Miss Vance? Sterling asked, his voice clearer this time. She has been with you for a long time, Your Grace. 7 years. She will have nowhere to go. A short, dismissive sound from Alistair. She has a roof over her head and food on her plate because of my generosity. She came to me with nothing. She will not be left with nothing. But she must go. A man in my position cannot afford such attachments. It is the price of ambition, Sterling, she will understand. His words fell into the quiet of the library. Each one a perfectly polished stone dropped into the deep well of her heart. It was not the decision that wounded her so deeply, but the cold calculation behind it, the utter certainty he had of her compliance. She has nowhere to go. He saw her not as a partner of 7 years, but as a dependent, a liability to be managed and dismissed. The foundation of her life, the quiet world she had so carefully maintained, crumbled to dust in that single overheard conversation. She did not move. She stood behind the door, her breath caught in her throat, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The blood drained from her face, leaving her skin feeling as cold and numb as marble. He was right about one thing. She had come to him with nothing. But he was wrong about everything else. 2 days later, he summoned her to the study. The room where she spent so many hours caring for his things now felt like a courtroom where her sentence was to be formally read. He stood by the window, staring out at the London grey, his broad shoulders set in a posture of finality. The ink stains on his fingers seemed darker today, as if he had been signing away entire worlds, her world. He turned to face her. There was no apology in his eyes, only a weary sort of impatience. He had made a difficult business decision, and now he had to deal with the unpleasant emotional fallout. "Elara," he began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "Our circumstances are about to change." She met his gaze and held it. She did not speak. She would not make this easy for him by weeping or pleading. She would not perform the role he had assigned her. He outlined the situation with brutal efficiency, his impending marriage to Lady Beatrice. The need for propriety. The end of their arrangement. He spoke of it as one might speak of closing a ledger. He was balancing his accounts, and she was a figure that no longer added up. When he was finished, he walked to his desk and picked up a small leather purse. It was heavy with coin. He held it out to her. "This will be sufficient for you to find new lodgings and establish yourself comfortably," he said. "It is more than generous. I expect you to be grateful." Grateful, the word hung in the air between them, sharp and poisonous. Grateful for being discarded like a worn-out coat. Grateful for 7 years of devotion being tallied up and paid off in a handful of gold. A strange calm washed over Elara. The shock and pain had burned away, leaving behind something cold and clear and hard as diamond. She looked at the purse in his hand, then back at his face. She saw the powerful Duke of Beaumont, a man accustomed to getting everything he wanted, a man who believed he held all the cards. And then she smiled. It was not a wide smile, not a happy one. It was a small, slow curve of her lips that did not reach her eyes. It was a smile of profound, secret knowledge. She said nothing. She simply reached out, took the small purse from his hand, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. She turned and walked out of the study, her back straight, her steps unhurried. She could feel his eyes on her, feel his confusion radiating across the room. He had expected tears, recriminations, a scene. He had not expected this chilling, silent acquiescence. He had not expected her smile. She went upstairs to the room that had been hers for 7 years. Her loyal maid, Martha, was already there, her face a mask of worried sympathy. The gossip of the house had clearly already reached the staff. "Miss Alara," Martha whispered, her hands twisting in her apron. "What will you do?" "I will pack," Alara said, her voice steady. She opened her wardrobe and began taking out her simple, well-made gowns. She did not pack everything. She packed only what was truly hers, what she had brought with her or purchased with the small allowance he gave her. She left behind the jewels and expensive fripperies he had gifted her over the years. They were part of the role she had played, and that role was now finished. There was one last thing. From the bottom of her wardrobe, she retrieved a heavy, locked rosewood box. It was the only thing of value she had brought into this house. It contained the last remnants of her life before Alistair, letters from her deceased mother, a faded portrait of her grandparents, and a thick, folded document tied with a faded blue ribbon. The deed. She had not looked at it in years. It was a relic from a past she had tried to forget. Her maternal grandfather, a stern, wealthy industrialist who had despised her charming but feckless father, had cut his own daughter off for marrying him. But he had held a secret affection for Alara, his only grandchild. Upon his death a decade ago, he had left her not money, fearing her father would squander it, but a single, peculiar inheritance, a tract of seemingly useless land in the north, dominated by a large, ugly stone quarry. The Blackwood Quarry. She tucked the box into her largest travelling case. Martha watched her, her brow furrowed. "Where will you go, miss?" "To the Clarendon Hotel for now," Alara replied, surprising even herself with the decisiveness of her plan. It was a respectable, expensive establishment. The money in the purse Alistair had given her would cover it, for a time. It was a poetic irony she could not resist. His dismissal would fund the first days of her liberation. Within the hour, she was gone. She walked out of the grand townhouse without a backward glance. She did not look up at the window where she knew he was probably watching, bewildered by her swift and silent departure. She was no longer a resident of his world. She was a visitor in her own, new life, and her first order of business was to find a good solicitor. The Clarendon Hotel was a world away from the quiet servitude of the Duke's residence. It was filled with the bustle of anonymous, important people. For the first time in 7 years, Alara felt invisible in a way that was liberating, not diminishing. She was not the Duke's companion. She was simply Miss Vance in room 3B. She spent the first day in a state of suspended shock, sitting in a plush armchair by the window, watching the city move below. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing bruise on her soul, but it was overlaid with a strange, exhilarating sense of possibility. She has nowhere to go. The words echoed in her mind, not as a curse, but as a challenge. On the second day, she sent for Mr. Abernathy, a solicitor whose name she had seen in the papers, known for his discretion and his sharp mind. He arrived that afternoon, a small bird-like man with spectacles perched on his nose. She laid out her situation with the same cool precision Alistair had used on her. She did not speak of broken hearts or 7 years of service. She spoke of property. She placed the rosewood box on the table between them, unlocked it, and handed him the deed. "My grandfather, Thomas Pike, left me this land upon his death 10 years ago," she explained. "It is called the Blackwood Quarry. I believe the current Duke of Beaumont has been operating a mining concern there." Mr. Abernathy unfolded the document. His eyebrows shot up as he read. He looked from the deed to her, then back again. He read it once more, his lips moving silently. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "This is an original title deed, with full and unencumbered ownership granted to you, Elara Vance, upon your grandfather's passing. There are no entails, no restrictions." He peered at the date. "The lease agreement your grandfather had with the Duke's company, it would have expired 5 years ago. Did you renew it?" "I was not aware of it," she said truthfully. "I have not been in control of my own affairs." Abernathy's eyes gleamed behind his spectacles. "Then His Grace, the Duke of Beaumont, has been illegally quarrying on your land for 5 years. Elara's breath hitched. She had known she owned the land. She had not understood the full implications. "The stone from that quarry," Abernathy continued, his mind clearly racing, "the unique Blackwood granite. It is the entire foundation of his construction empire. The Beaumont Bridge, the new Royal Gallery wing, the Regent's Terrace, it is all built from that stone. It is his signature, his monopoly." Without it, he trailed off, letting the unspoken conclusion hang in the air. Without it, Alistair was ruined. His contracts would be worthless, his reputation shattered, his ambition, the driving force of his life, would be brought to a sudden, grinding halt. A wave of vertigo washed over her. The power she held was immense, terrifying. She could destroy the man who had so casually destroyed her. The thought brought her no pleasure, only a cold, heavy weight in the pit of her stomach. "What do you wish to do, Miss Vance?" the solicitor asked gently, sensing her turmoil. She looked down at her hands, lying still in her lap. They were not stained with ink. They were clean. "I wish," she said, her voice barely a whisper, to be seen. The following Monday, a crisp, formal letter from the offices of Abernathy and Sons was delivered to the Duke of Beaumont. It informed him that all operations at the Blackwood Quarry were to cease and desist immediately, as he was trespassing on the private property of one Miss Elara Vance, the sole and legal owner. It further noted that a full accounting for 5 years of illegal extraction would be forthcoming. Alistair read the letter once, then twice. He stared at her name. Elara Vance. It was impossible. A clerical error. A preposterous joke. He remembered the useless tract of land her grandfather had owned. He had paid a pittance for the lease years ago, a lease his people had assured him was all but perpetual. He had never given it a second thought. He sent a runner to his own solicitors. The response came back within hours, and it was devastating. Abernathy was correct. The lease had expired, the ownership had transferred. The land, the quarry, the very bedrock of his fortune, belonged to Elara. The woman he had dismissed with a purse of gold, the woman who, he had declared with such certainty, had nowhere to go. His first reaction was fury, a blistering, arrogant rage. How dare she, after all he had done for her? He would fight this. He would crush her. He would buy her out. Every man and woman had a price. He went to the Clarendon Hotel, his anger a storm cloud around him. He demanded to see Miss Vance. The clerk at the front desk looked at him with polite impassivity. "Miss Vance is not receiving visitors, Your Grace. He was the Duke of Beaumont. No one refused to see him." "Tell her I am here," he commanded. The clerk did not move. "My instructions are quite clear, Your Grace." Stunned, Alistair retreated. The first crack appeared in the fortress of his self-assurance. He spent the next 2 days in a state of escalating panic. Work at the quarry had stopped. His foremen were frantic. The delay of even a week would put him in breach of 3 major contracts. The news of his engagement to Lady Beatrice was in the society pages, but the triumph felt hollow, ashes in his mouth. He began to see Elara everywhere. Not the woman herself, but the ghost of her. He saw her in the perfect polish of the silver on his desk, now beginning to dull. He saw her in the way the curtains were drawn slightly askew, a detail she never would have missed. The house felt cavernous and cold without her quiet, organizing presence. He realized, with a jolt that went deeper than his financial fears, that her silence had not been emptiness. It had been the sound of his world being held together. His anger dissolved into a raw, desperate fear. It was not just about the quarry anymore, it was about her. The smile she had given him when she left, that small, knowing, terrible smile, haunted him. He had thought he knew her completely. He had thought she was simple, dependent, grateful. He had been a fool. A blind, arrogant fool. He sent letters, flowers, messengers. All were returned, unopened. Finally, in desperation, he sent a single note, delivered by Mr. Sterling himself. I was wrong. Please, I must speak with you. Alistair, 2 days later, a reply came, a time and a place, not at her hotel, at her solicitor's office. The offices of Abernathy and Sons were quiet and intimidating. Alistair was shown into a conference room. Elara was already there, seated at the head of a long, polished table. Mr. Abernathy sat at her right hand. She was not the woman he had dismissed. That woman had been soft, pliant, dressed in muted colours. This Elara wore a dress of deep sapphire blue, the colour of authority. Her hair was swept up in a severe but elegant style. Her expression was calm, composed, and utterly unreadable. She looked like a queen about to pass judgment. "Your Grace," she said, her voice cool and even. It was the first time she had ever addressed him by his title. The formality was a chasm between them. He stood before her, the most powerful man in the room by birthright, yet he felt like a supplicant. The ink on his fingers, usually a mark of his power, now felt like a brand of his folly. "Elara," he began, his voice rough, "there has been a misunderstanding." "No," she corrected him gently. "I believe for the first time there is a perfect understanding." She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Please, sit." He sat. He felt clumsy, oversized, his carefully constructed composure unravelling under her steady gaze. "I will not waste your time with false pleasantries, Your Grace," she said, her tone businesslike. "You have been mining my property without a valid lease for 5 years. My solicitor has drawn up an accounting of the value of the stone you have extracted. It is a considerable sum." Abernathy slid a piece of paper across the table. Alistair glanced at the figure. It was astronomical. It would bankrupt him twice over. He looked at Elara, truly looked at her. He saw the intelligence he had mistaken for placidity, the strength he had mistaken for dependence. He had possessed a diamond and treated it like common glass. "I cannot pay this," he said, the admission tearing at his pride. "I know," she replied. He slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him. He was at her mercy. "What do you want, Elara? Revenge? Do you want to see me ruined? Is that the price for my transgression?" "I am not a vengeful woman, Alistair," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly as she used his name. "But I am also not the woman you sent away with a purse and an expectation of gratitude." She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. "For 7 years I lived in your shadow. I managed your home. I soothed your temper. I provided the quiet stability that allowed you to build your empire. I was a partner in all but name, yet you saw me as a dependent, an attachment to be severed." Tears pricked at his eyes. He did not bother to hide them. "I was a fool," he whispered. "I was building a legacy of stone and steel, and I failed to see that the true foundation of my life was you. I thought I needed a title, a name. I was wrong. I need you." He reached across the table, his hand open, pleading, "Marry me, Elara, be my duchess. Everything I have will be yours, the quarry, the title, all of it. It is yours by right. Just come back." This was the moment, the climax of his desperation. He was offering her everything she might once have dreamed of, the title, the security, the public acknowledgement. He was offering to restore her to her place, but at a much higher station. Elara looked at his outstretched hand, the fingers still faintly stained with ink. She remembered the countless times that hand had rested on her shoulder or brushed a stray hair from her cheek. She remembered the kindness, the shared laughter, the comfortable silences that had come before the vast, empty ones. And she remembered him telling Sterling she had nowhere else to go. She did not take his hand. Instead, she slid another document across the table. It was not a bill for past damages. It was a contract. "I will not be your duchess, Alistair," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "That part of my life is over. I will not be a possession, however prized." A look of pure astonishment crossed his face, as blank and startling as a page suddenly ripped from a book. He stared at the contract, uncomprehending. "I am not interested in destroying you," she continued. "Your work is important. The things you build are beautiful. But from now on, you will conduct your business on a proper footing." He picked up the contract. It was a proposal for a new lease agreement for the Blackwood Quarry. The terms were strict but fair. It stipulated a significant annual fee and a percentage of the profits from all contracts using the Blackwood granite. It named her, Miss Elara Vance, as sole proprietor and him, the Duke of Beaumont, as the lessee. It was a partnership, a true one, written in ink and bound by law. "I will not be your wife," she said, her voice clear and strong in the quiet room. "I will be your partner. You will not own me. You will owe me. And you will pay your debts." He read the document, his eyes scanning the clauses. He looked up at her, his expression a mixture of shock, awe, and something else she had never seen there before, respect. Deep, profound respect. He had tried to buy her silence with a purse of gold. She was offering him his survival in exchange for her equality. "And Lady Beatrice?" She asked quietly. "There is no Lady Beatrice," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "There is only you. There has only ever been you. I was just too blind to see it." He stood up, walked around the table and stopped before her. He did not touch her. He simply looked down at her, the powerful Duke humbled before the woman he had cast aside. "Is this what you want, Elara?" he asked. "To be my partner?" "Yes," she said. "This is what I want." He nodded slowly. "Then I accept your terms." The tension in the room broke. It was not the passionate reunion of a romance, but the quiet, cathartic click of the world settling into its right and proper order. He had handed her a small purse and told her to be grateful. She had returned and, with a quiet smile, handed him back his entire world, but on her terms. He reached out then, not to take, but to ask. His hand gently cupped her cheek. She did not pull away. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It was not a kiss of possession or passion, but one of aching gratitude and newfound reverence. It was the first kiss of a new beginning, on ground she owned. 1 year later, Elara Vance stood at the window of her own townhouse in a fashionable London square. She was reviewing the quarterly accounts from the Blackwood Quarry, which, under her astute oversight, had become more profitable than ever. She was a woman of means, of influence. Her name was spoken with respect in the city's financial circles. She was beholden to no one. There was a knock at her door. Her maid, Martha, who had come with her and now ran her new household with fierce loyalty, showed in the visitor. It was Alistair. He no longer came to her with the easy entitlement of a man returning to his own home. He came as a suitor. He called on her twice a week, bringing not extravagant jewels, but books of poetry she had once mentioned enjoying, or a rare bloom for her conservatory. He courted her with a patience and humility she had never known he possessed. "The accounts are in order," she said, gesturing to the ledger on her desk. "I had no doubt," he replied, his eyes soft. "You are a better businessman than I am." The inkstains were still on his fingers, but now, when she saw them, she saw a symbol of their shared enterprise, not his solitary ambition. He did not press her for more. He had not mentioned marriage again since that day in the solicitor's office. He seemed to understand that he was not winning her back, but earning the right to know this new woman she had become. He was proving that he loved Elara Vance, not the quiet companion who lived in his shadow. She looked at him, standing in the afternoon light of her drawing room, and felt not the ache of a past betrayal, but the gentle, hopeful stirring of a possible future. She had learnt the hardest of lessons, that her worth was not something a man could grant her with his name or his protection. It was intrinsic, forged in silence, and claimed in a moment of quiet, smiling defiance. True freedom, she had discovered, was not having nowhere to go. It was having the power to choose her own destination. And love, if it were to find her again, would have to meet her there, as an equal, on ground she had claimed for herself.